Tim Ives, cinematographer for Halston. Halston leverages his single invented name into a worldwide fashion empire that's synonymous with luxury, sex, status, and fame, literally defining the era. So, Tim, I guess my first question for you as cinematographer, how do you define the era in which Halston defined his own era, I guess, like visually?
Well, I think for us, we just looked at, we didn't want to redefine Halston. He certainly defined himself quite well. So we looked at a lot of archival footage and archival photographs. We were shooting in locations that, locations that he had been in, or we were replicating them. And I felt like my job was to sort of pay tribute, pay homage to those locations, and to make them feel just like as much as possible the photographs and the footage that we've seen him in before.
So one of the locations, it does. One of the locations we see a lot is Studio 54 for sure. I guess, can you talk about recreating that? And I feel like it's such an iconic venue, even for people who have never been there. I think most people know at least have an image of it. So how did you go about recreating that and making it look like it does?
That was super tricky. But Mark Ricker, our production designer, is responsible for most of it. We filmed it at the Manhattan Center here in New York. We filmed the whole thing during COVID. So one of the prerequisites was that we were not allowed to use smoke, because at the time nobody really knew if atmosphere was going to possibly make the situation worse or better. Now we know a little bit more about it. But I had to go into shooting that without atmosphere, which, if you can imagine, Studio 54 with nobody smoking, it's insane. Well, first of all, Mark designed an incredible set and had the moon and the Coke spoon and all the vertical lights hanging with the cop lights on the bottom. I mean, it was remarkable. But then I really had to figure out how this was going to look gritty, because everything we've ever seen in Studio 54 was kind of gritty. So we were using Sigma primes on this show, and we had a set of Sigma classics which flared in a very unique way that actually you wouldn't assume them to be something that you would want, really, but they kind of ghosted and flared, and when all those lights hit them, they created sort of an atmosphere, an interesting atmosphere that resembled as close as I've ever been able to see smoke. So that kind of gridded it up, thankfully. But besides that, we use a lot of LED lighting. We use a lot of traditional lighting that would have been found in the place. We studied archival pictures. I went to the Studio 54 museum at the Brooklyn Museum. They had a show here, and went to look at the costumes and the posters and archival footage from there as well. And we really try to use as many original lights as you would have seen back then. Not really so much on-camera LEDs, but we used, we had tons of LEDs around the set, Parkans as well as 360s and S90s and for the base. But we had to find original Parkans, because if you have an LED Parkan, you can tell it's LED. You can see all the little dots in it. So that was kind of tricky, locating all those and then rigging them. But it was a big rig by Ken Shibata, our gaffer, who did a fantastic job there. And it was, you'd swear you were at Studio 54, except the fact that it felt like maybe on a Tuesday night, because it was COVID. We could only get 75 extras. But we blocked it all out. We did tiling, and a lot of tiling this last fall. A lot of tiling.
Another location I want to ask you about, because it's so striking, is the Halston office, because it's so many windows and then also so many seemingly mirrors. Everything is, and I guess what kind of challenges does that present to you as a cinematographer, shooting in that location? So specifically, I'm thinking in episode 4, there's a lot of office scenes, and it's just everything is reflective. And I just was how did they even do these? Really?
It's interesting. Well, again, Mark Ricker, our production designer, had all the mirrors. Every single mirror there is on a gimbal. And we also had blinds built out of Mylar and reflective material that we could put in the distance or somewhere closer to lens at times to reflect something else off screen that wasn't a camera or a boom or a light. So it was precise. We had to really figure it out, especially those scenes where we were moving around the space a lot. But it was tricky. It was definitely tricky, and there was a few times where we had to ask Post to help us a little bit because there just was not, when you get two cameras going in there, it got a little tricky for sure. But it was a remarkable location, and again, felt like we stepped back into time for Halston's offices.
You've done in your career. I'm looking at your resume. You were cinematographer on like How to Make in America, Girls, Fosse Verdon. You've done a lot of. You've captured New York a lot. I think for people watching television, I guess for you, like what is the essence of New York that you're? How have you been able to capture New York so many times in so many different kind of time periods and also locations and stuff, I guess, and like class strategies
right.
even.
Well, on Girls, we shot all over Brooklyn, and the one thing that we said we didn't want to do was to. One of the rules of that show was don't put anything iconic or touristy in the frame. And often you're going down the street and you're like, oh my God, it's the Chrysler Building in the background. Oh, there's the Empire State Building. Let's get it out. We wanted to really feel like you were in a community. You were in this big city, but you were in a little part of it that was a real community. And we avoided all the tropes of the tourist version of New York City in Girls. And I was on Girls for a while. It was a remarkable show to work on. But that was one thing we did for that show. How to Make in America sort of had the same thing. That was probably my first show. It was my first show, and we that was a little more gritty. And we were in the Lower East Side, and it wasn't about any of that stuff as far as iconic New York. But and then Fosse Verdon, of course, and in this show, which were more period shows, so a lot more interiors, and those again were driven more off of locations that the real people that we were depicting had been in, and that is a little bit easier because you're not having to worry about if you're framing something in from the future.
Other thing I want to ask you about with Halston is the way you kind of frame Ewan. I found it interesting because I felt like you're kind of like at his waist looking up slightly, and I like moving in on him, at least in a couple of the episodes. Certainly that is a kind of like how he looks. I guess, can you talk about the decision of how you kind of like wanted him in the frame and how the camera moved into him, I guess, often?
That's very interesting that you noticed that. Yeah, when Halston had his power with him, before things started crumbling in his life, we wanted to frame him low and look up at him and give him that sense of authority and power. And then those times when he was, when things were starting to crumble down, we got to raise the camera up a little bit and try to make him a little bit smaller. And I usually like putting the camera anyway about breastbone height on any actor. If I'm shooting kids on a kids show like Stranger Things, or the one I'm not that it's a kids show, but I'm also doing a film right now that we have some children actors in it. I try to beat their level, but that's just because I want to see the world from their perspective. But I like to shoot basically from the breastbone. I think it's a nice height. You tend to get your architecture looks normal, nothing skews at that point, and the camera's fairly level instead of looking down or up. But then, like you noticed on Halston, we did shoot him from a slightly lower angle at times, just to give him that veritas and that power that he had for a good part of his career.
Yeah, it's really cool. It was definitely something where I was like, oh, that's something it's definitely noticeable, but not in a good way. I found that really, really interesting, and the way to
I hope in a good way, yeah.
Yeah, no, he looks great in it. And I guess like for you, like you mentioned, like having to do this during COVID and stuff. Like, what was a particular challenge, I guess, during this project that you were like most happy to have succeeded in doing?
And I mean, the whole thing was maybe one of the hardest jobs I've ever done, and it was the whole restarting a show that had actually started in the spring. And Will Rexer had shot the first episode, and then everything shut down. And he's a friend of mine, and when everything started back up again, and he couldn't do the show, I threw my name in the hat, and we were off and running with Dan Minahan, our producer and director. But it was really hard, Chris. I mean, all the other DPs will tell you the same thing: the face shields and the daily testing and feeling like a guinea pig to see if we were going to actually get through this thing. It was hard. It was hard to get fresh air. It was hard to see through the masks, not see reflections of the shields. But besides that, I mean, we're all dedicated professionals, and every single person on the, I mean, I've said it before, but every department on this show is just remarkable. So the feeling of, you know, the support around us within each other and from the studio and from Ryan Murphy Productions was just immense. And we knew that we had to put something out there that didn't, you know, people can't say, well, it looks like that because they shot in COVID. You know, well, that was never going to fly for us. So, or for anybody, I would imagine. So we had to, you know, bring our A game to it, and I'm super proud of it.
Yeah, I will say, as someone, I think people would be hard pressed to know that you shot it during COVID. I would say when they watch it. So Halston is on Netflix. Thank you so much, Tim, for doing this. I appreciate it. And stick around. We'll have you on the roundtable at the end. Thank you.